Okay.
Yeah. Hello, hello. Microphone. Check one. You pumped?
Sorry?
Are you pumped?
Oh, yeah, it's exciting. It's always great to be here.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
How's the food? Can we get a quick round of applause and appreciation for Ajit Pai here?
Oh, no.
Please. He's a busy dude. And
No. You haven't heard what I'm going to say yet, so
yeah,
I appreciate
maybe withhold the applause until the end of the fireside. Ask me anything with Ajit. But it's a real honor to get to hang out with Ajit for a little bit. He's a busy dude. He's done a lot of things in his career. He's going to do a lot more. But we're among some of broadband's best and brightest, and we're at a really interesting time in the nation's history. And there's a lot that you have to share, Ajit. So we'd love to get in. If we could start with a quick introduction from you of you. Do you know you? You know you.
A very metaphysical question, but hey, everybody, Ajit Pai. I know some of you. To those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I hope to correct that in short order. I used to work at the FCC in a variety of capacities, and now I'm a partner at Searchlight Capital, a firm based in New York, but I'm based in the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan area, where I invest in, among other things, all kinds of tech, telecom, and media companies. And really want to appreciate, first and foremost, Jace and the Ready team for extending the invitation. Really great to see so many broadband leaders in one place. Secondly, I want to thank you for hosting this in New Orleans. It's almost surreal being here. My professional career started literally around the corner. I was a federal law clerk at the courthouse on Camp and Poydras, so this is a very familiar place to me. The first meal I had was at the corner at Mother's, where I had a debris po' boy. And the first wedding I ever crashed was in this hotel, in this very room, where after a few too many hurricanes, some buddies of mine decided, hey, let's just go see what's happening at the Windsor Court Hotel, where
hurricanes, the weather pattern or the drink?
The libation. So anyway, it's now I'm here in a more formal, routine capacity. So it's great to be back. But and also just a salute to all of those of you who are working at the state level in whatever capacity, governmental, non-governmental, to make these broadband programs work. I know firsthand how challenging it is to take all of the puts and takes of a complex statutory scheme and implement it. And so I want to thank you for your public service. I was mentioning to somebody last night, this is truly a generational opportunity. And when your work is done, the beneficiaries of your work may not know your names, but they're going to be forever grateful that you're helping to close once and for all this digital divide. So hats off to you for doing the hard work to get the job done.
That's well said, Ajit. Can we get a quick round of applause for the state folks, like the state directors, state officers? They do have one of the most important and least thanked jobs in all of broadband. So I appreciate you appreciating them. So we'd love to jump into this stuff. I would love to start, Ajit, with the fact that you did a hell of a lot of stuff. 2017 to 2021. A long list, repeal net neutrality. The
internet's still here.
It's still alive. It's still here. It still has great memes.
Yeah.
You were appointed by Obama, and then you went through the Trump administration.
Yeah, okay. Somewhat different administration.
That was a bit of a change, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you're still alive, and you're looking good. So
thank you.
What advice do you have? How was that, first and foremost, and then what advice do you have for people that are looking ahead to this next January 20th change of things?
A good question. Well, coffee always helps, as you might know. I'm always
not a hurricane.
Yeah, it's a somewhat smaller receptacle than I'm used to, but I'm making do as best I can. But no, I think. Some things are obviously going to change from administration to administration, but I think some things are going to continue. And I think broadband, honestly, might be one of the few things that Americans agree on. There's a bipartisan recognition, especially coming out of COVID, that broadband is no longer a nice to have. It's really a must have. And not just for residential broadband, which of course all of you are charged with addressing, but even on the enterprise side too. When I talk to farmers and ranchers back home in the great state, one might say the greatest state of Kansas.
Whoa. Well, hold on.
that's one of the things I hear is that I really need broadband to enhance the productivity of my farm. Or when I talk to rural healthcare providers, my own parents were physicians in a rural county hospital for over 40 years. One of the things holding them back is the lack of telehealth and telemedicine and being able to reach patients who aren't able to take time off to travel for a job, or even enterprises, small entrepreneurs who might be in places like Vermilion, South Dakota, where broadband is enabling them to reach a worldwide audience. And these are the types of things that really help integrate every single American into not just the digital economy, but the digital society. And so I truly think that broadband is one of the things that's, even though there are going to be programmatic changes on the incrementally going forward, I do think the core promise of broadband is something that every single elected official, Republican or Democrat, is going to embrace.
Well said. We'll dig into a couple of quick things that you did. One of the things you did while you were there, you
you actually looked up my tweets. This is dangerous.
You authorized an unknown startup is building a crazy idea of low Earth orbit satellite system, SpaceX. SpaceX. It was SpaceX, and so what was that like at the time, and then how's that going now?
I think it's going great. It's interesting. You mentioned net neutrality. One of the criticisms of the time was, well, how can you repeal these regulations and restore the Title I framework when there isn't sufficient competition in the broadband marketplace? And that's a fair argument. There needs to be competitive choice. And so one of the things we try to do in concert with that is to promote much more competition and innovation in the broadband sector. And at the time, back in 2017, it was thought that, okay, broadband means terrestrial, maybe a little bit of fixed wireless, but really it's just a wire, either HFC or fiber going to a location. We thought, well, there are all these innovative entrepreneurs in space that are doing all this great work. Let's authorize them, all these low Earth orbit constellations, not the old GSOs that are providing a very high latency, low bandwidth services, but very low latency, high bandwidth services.
Right.
And we don't know if it's going to work, creating this mesh network in space. We don't know, how the orbital slots are going to play out or what spectrum assets they're going to leverage. But we do know that it's almost like a field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you allow these companies to innovate and innovate in the United States, critically, they will come. And so now, of course, it's, there's a lot of talk about Starlink. Back in 2017, 2018, people were asking me, including some critics within the agency, why are you authorizing all of these LEOs? I mean, the bulk of them are going to fail. We don't know what they're going to do. Does it even work? And that's the point of that tweet, which I just issued. But back then I was arguing, that's the point, is that we need to allow people to innovate and see what great ideas rise to the top. And now, it's hard to remember, but not long ago, we were going hand in hand to the Russians and begging for launch capacity. Now we have US-based launch that is superior to anything else in the world. Not long ago, it was thought that US-based satellite broadband was just something that was a corner case for maybe IoT applications, narrowband. Now we're seeing Starlink provide service at a price point and speed that is comparable in many cases. And as you heard from John, the terrific presentation to begin the day, from all the Louisiana folks, it is really an important use case for those high cost areas that are otherwise going to be impossible to serve with fiber. So I'm proud of the work the FCC did. I mean, I don't claim the credit for that. It's our FCC career staff that really helped do the hard work to authorize those LEOs. And I hope the consumers benefit in the time to come.
Yeah, well, thank you for your leadership and supporting American innovation, because they seem to be doing pretty decent at what they're doing. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So a couple of other questions. Like, you were a major proponent of making sure that rural connectivity is improved for America, and you launched, among other things, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. So can we talk a little bit about what you see is what is it now, and if you were starting over again, what would you be doing right now?
I was just talking to John about this. John and I worked together at the FCC back when he was at the agency and during my predecessor's time. And it's interesting because in many ways, as John outlined very thoughtfully, there's some good parts of RDOF concepts that I think served and are serving consumers very well. The general reverse auction framework, for example, giving a little bit more flexibility. There are certainly things I would change. I mean, needless to say, I think a lot of the shortcomings have been talked about a lot, but in terms of some of the bidders that were participating, some, for example, that were essentially trying to bite off more than they can chew, essentially a bid that outpaced their track record.
That happened?
And that was a big problem.
You had some of those?
No question about it. And similarly, one of the other problems that we had larger strategic bidders that were essentially engaging in opportunistic behavior, bidding down such that either they would default and there wouldn't be enough of a penalty for them to pay, so there was essentially blocking competition, or they would take it and be guaranteed that no one would ever overbuild them. And so, those are the kinds of things that we would change. Additionally, and in my defense, I suppose, we didn't know when we were setting up this program in 2018 that, hey, by the way, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, the Congress is going to authorize a $42 billion fund in addition to other major vehicles like CPF to help solve this problem. Had we known that, because we had thought at the time, when I did the event at the White House announcing this, we just assumed the only funding we can establish is going to be essentially a 10-year, $2 billion per year annuity.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about the funding in those terms, you structure it very, very differently. So I really, I commend the folks like John and Louisiana Connect LA who structured things mindful of the lessons that we learned, because I think this is iterative.
Yeah.
And I think they've really done a good job. And in other states too. I mean, we've worked with Dr. Holmes. I don't know if Dr. H is still here. In Virginia, you're just trying to apply some of the lessons that we've learned in a way that's going to be very thoughtful for those states. So I would do things tremendously differently, but there were some good things that are happening. Over 650, I think it is, 1,000 consumers who have broadband today that didn't prior to RDOF because of the program. So
you oversaw billions of dollars flowing out to providers to get folks connected, and the state directors in the room, there's collectively over $25 billion worth of BEAD represented, and there's a new administration coming into the office. Did you see the election earlier this month?
Was there one?
Yeah, there was a primary.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And so in January 20th, there's we're going to be under new management in the United States of America, and they have a mandate. They view themselves as having a mandate from the people, and that mandate includes government efficiency. And there have been recently discussions of what to do with BEAD, and folks that have been working for the last 3 years would like to make the case to the incoming administration that the incoming administration can get done in 3 months what the prior administration invested 3 years into doing. And we'd love to hear your advice for folks thinking about how to look ahead to this big change, because you've survived a big transition like that, and you still managed to get money out the door. So what advice do you have for the people that are in the state seats right now?
Well, I guess part of it is more federal programmatic in the sense that there are going to be changes to the BEAD program, I would assume. It was very interesting to hear some of the questions and commentary during the morning sessions about frustrations with NTIA that in terms of timeliness or ambiguity. And those are the types of things, look, just as BEAD in some ways, its implementation in various states can improve upon RDOF. I'm hopeful that the new administration can take some of the lessons we've learned over the last 3 years through NTIA's experience with you and improve it to make sure that you're able to do your jobs. And so if there are things that regulatory changes or programmatic changes otherwise that can help, I think you should let them know. I think they have a very open ear to doing that. And certainly at the end of the day, stepping back from the politics of it all, again, this is a bipartisan cause. I truly believe 100%. That. I saw it when I was in office that those were the heads, those were the times when I'd see the heads nod the most vigorously among my Democratic friends, was when I said, we need to get everybody connected to the internet. That's not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. Nope. It's simply an American issue.
It's an American issue.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So you have so much to share. You were there, you've been there.
Well, the value of it might be in question.
Yeah, it's quantity, not quality. But
Thank you. Exactly.
But it's okay.
I've been faking it till I make it. So.
Listen, though, there is a really clear thinker stepping in to fill the shoes that you filled in the chairman role, Brendan Carr.
Yeah.
Who's had really good perspectives on also supporting innovation. Like, are you advising Carr on any informal capacity? Or are you talking to him, and what advice do you have for him?
So Brendan was an advisor of mine when I was a commissioner, and
Beautiful.
Was the general counsel and then a commissioner himself when I was chairman. And so, he's a longstanding friend. And so if you ever ask for advice, my phone always rings, and I'm always happy to offer it. But I think it's a very important role at a challenging time. So I'm hopeful when it comes to issues like this, he will approach it with the same care and thoughtfulness that he has on other issues past.
So Brendan, if you're listening, you should ring Ajit. At minimum, you should also advise him on dank memes. But once upon a time, you were like a dank meme lord.
Yeah, sadly, my kids are old enough now to start researching some of the detritus from the internet circa 2017, 2018. And it was an interesting time, shall we say.
You used to have game. The internet is thirsty now for Ajit Pai Meme tweets. I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody remembers. Do you folks remember these? Some legendary. Maybe I'll have some examples later, but
Yeah, hopefully safe for sharing. But
can we switch gears for just a second and talk, spectrum policy and space, like in the context of space? And we've got orders of magnitude more satellites now than we did when, you'd taken the reins, and there is a large number of satellites on their way up, and they're using radio. And
yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that, the intersection of those topics?
Oh, definitely. And I should have mentioned that was another core part of our strategy to promote more competition in the broadband space, was just pushing a whole lot more spectrum out there. And, I think it's fair to say that our agency, when I was there, was by far the most aggressive and successful at pushing the public airwaves for the benefit of the public.
Yeah.
Unprecedented number of spectrum auctions that raised over $100 billion for the U.S. Treasury. And less remarked upon, but I think also very important, was a 5x increase in the amount of spectrum in midband that is available for Wi-Fi. We allocated the entire 6 gigahertz band for Wi-Fi, and now you see, if you go to your neighborhood Costco, you'll find Wi-Fi 7 routers that can get you gigabit throughput symmetrical, which is unbelievable. I mean, compared to where we were in 2017, when you had these 2.4 channels that were very constrained. And so I'm really excited about what all these spectrum assets, licensed and unlicensed, mean for American consumers. And when it comes to LEOs in particular, there's always going to be a fight. As we all know, space operators want more, terrestrial providers want more, U.S. government agencies want more, want to have what they have. And so it's very difficult to balance all those interests. And that's another thing that makes this so challenging. And plus, on top of that, the United States, as folks might be aware, is unique among OECD countries in that we bifurcate spectrum authority. Commercial spectrum is within the FCC's bailiwick. Governmental spectrum is within the Department of Commerce. And so essentially you have to have the two of them meet and collaborate in order to get things done. And so during my time, that was, a lot of the gray hair I have is attributable to either trying to work with or otherwise fight with the Department of Defense, FAA, NASA, NOAA, you name it, to get more of the spectrum into the hands of American consumers, which is not an easy thing to do.
Well said. Do you remember that time we had a global pandemic?
I do recall it so much.
There was a part of that where you had to do some pretty tough work. I don't know if we can get this thing to show here.
God help me.
You basically showed the PRC influenced equipment makers the door.
Yeah.
That was tough, right? Like, what?
It was very hard. Early on in my tenure, this wasn't publicly facing, so I couldn't say anything about it. But I started to be one of the things that I had at the time was a TS-SCI clearance. And so you start working with your friends in the national security and intelligence communities. And as we started to get these briefings, it became pretty clear that there was a national security threat presented by certain equipment services and services vendors whose equipment was all over the United States. And so we started to think about, well, what should we do about this? And the first easy thing was to say, going forward, we're not going to allow any of that into our networks.
Okay.
All fine. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And they designated Huawei and ZTE, among others, as insecure. The bigger problem is, what do you do retrospectively? Because as we saw, a lot of these vendors had equipment in U.S. networks already, which were curiously clustered around, shall we say, places with significant military installations across the United States. And so we're working with some of the smaller rural companies. It became clear they couldn't fund the removal of this equipment. The FCC couldn't have funded. I mean, our budget was minuscule compared to the need. And so we worked with Congress in a bipartisan way to establish a rip and replace program, which is now being funded up, but it was really important. And so, it was unfortunate during the pandemic that, of course, this program had to happen at the same time because it just makes things a little more complicated. But I don't know, when it comes to national security, I thought it was really important to change policy in a fundamental way.
Yeah, thanks for helping to connect and protect Americans. That was a cool move.
Yeah.
So I have a much more serious question for you, Ajit, and it might be too personal. So if it's not,
all right.
On an annual basis, like how much, like by weight or quantity, would you say the Pai household consumes of Reese's products?
Yeah, more than you would expect.
Pounds, kilos?
Yeah,
What would
well,
we-
so one of the things we established around Halloween was a tradition of parental taxation. So my kids go.
Oh my God.
Oh, absolutely. So
Really?
they go collect. I give them pillowcases. They go through the neighborhood, collect all their stash, and they bring it home. And then I essentially confiscate all the Reese's that they have. And
Keep all that you can carry, but the Reese's are mine.
yeah, and so it's just a way of letting them know, like, look, either you help me knock out this mortgage, or you hand over some of your candy stash as just to help them understand what it's going to be like when they become adults and they have to fork over some of their hard-earned money.
Getting them used to taxation too in the process.
I know. But I would love to know at Hershey's headquarters, is there some slide about the amount of publicity we gave Reese's over the years that I was in office? I don't know, but
I don't know.
it's a fantastic product. If you ever get a chance to go to Hershey, PA, highly recommend it. There's an entire board talking about how they came up with the idea. It is just absolutely brilliant. It's now we're innovating in space, but previously we innovated in this little container, which is delightful, absolutely delightful.
It reminds me of the Peter Thiel quote, like we were promised flying cars and instead we got 144 characters.
Yeah.
We were promised reusable rockets, which, check.
Yeah.
So we should get back to serious innovation
I could not agree more.
in peanut butter chocolate dessert. So yeah. So switching gears for a second, as you were FCC chairman, now you're a partner at Searchlight Capital Partners, not the 1990s movie blockbuster guys, but the top dog TMTPE guys.
Well, you're very kind.
But states that let's say we all band together and help the new incoming administration see that BEAD can be a major first 100 days victory. Let's say we succeed in that task. Then the states need to go and find really great subgrantees. Can you put on your Searchlight partner hat for a second and talk about what you look for in excellence in operators?
So a few things. First, and this might be unusual among financial sponsors, I don't know if other firms think of it the same way, but what we quickly realized is that there are terrific operators that are focused on a particular state. They wake up in the morning and go to sleep thinking about connectivity in that state. And to us, at least, that creates tremendous alignment with us, as investors, because we know that we are all focused on building the best possible network that we can in that state. Moreover, they have a team behind them that is capable. What's the quality of their build team, for example? Do they have a good CFO and FP&A process and things like that? Just so that we know that we're not backing somebody who tomorrow might wake up and say, hey, I want to go to a completely different industry, that kind of thing. And then similarly, does the state itself have a framework that is favorable for private investors?
Interesting.
So one of the reasons, full disclosure, we have a company called All Points Broadband in Virginia, and thanks in part to Dr. Holmes' leadership over many years before we even made the investment, Virginia was at the front of the pack in terms of setting up a framework under the, I guess 2 governors ago it was, to allocate subsidies from the state to various entities, counties and broadband providers. And so we kind of had confidence in knowing, look, the state gets it. They understand the importance of broadband, and more generally, they have a favorable business climate. They want to welcome private investment as a
This is pure gold for state directors. I hope so. Yeah. Can you say more? Like what?
Well, I think the thing, look, I'm obviously preaching my book, but even taking off my Searchlight hat, I truly believe this now, that state broadband directors should think of private capital as an aid to what you're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, public sector funds are only going to go so far, and you really need to invest in. One of the most powerful slides that I think Thomas was talking about was the number of local providers in Louisiana that got these awards. Many of these are going to be subscale. I mean, they can't tap the public markets in most cases. And even in the private markets, if they don't have private capital, they're essentially going to have to self-fund, which limits their build ambition. And so that's where private capital can really step into the breach. And look, obviously we are underwriting, as every investor does, to a certain return on invested capital that we're hoping for. And so that creates an expectation that the framework is going to incentivize that. And so when we back a company like that, we're saying, we're going to give you all the capital you need in addition to the public subsidies to achieve a very ambitious build. And we're confident at the end of the day, the companies that we've backed are going to be able to do that. But I would encourage all of you to encourage some of these private investors to come into your state. At the end of the day, those are the ones who are really going to help. And even in unexpected ways, if I know there was a question earlier about letter of credit requirements or performance bonds, that by definition ties up working capital, right? The money that you have to tie up in that financial instrument cannot be allocated to the build. But if you have a financial sponsor that is willing to capitalize the company, that allows them to have the flexibility, the liquidity to start building now, to really supply or give you an application that is strong and that is backed, so that you don't have to worry about, okay, is this company really going to be able to do it? And so we're really optimistic about BEAD and all sorts of different funding streams like that when they work in tandem with private capital.
Dig that. Okay, switching gears for a second, Ajit. Let's say your car and you need to appoint somebody to the FCC, but they have to be a Star Wars character. So which do you choose and why?
Oh, this one is easy, I guess. Yoda, I think, because
Yoda.
Oh, absolutely. Because in so many different ways,
Nice.
And I think it was John who pointed out through the morning session, we're always fighting yesterday's war, and so in some ways, I feel like channeling Yoda when he's instructing Luke and Dagobah in Empire Strikes Back. You must unlearn what you have learned.
Ooh.
That is so true when it comes to broadband policy, because I think, as I found in government, one of the most powerful forces in inertia is like the only reason why we do something is because we did it before. And I think the ability to unlearn some of the things, obviously maintain some of the wisdom from previous iterations, but really improve upon it and think in terms of step function improvements is really powerful. So I don't know who else is going to be at the FCC or, of course, at NTIA, but I would hope that they would think anew about some of these paradigms so that they're not locked into the old way of doing things.
Yeah, well said. You're very good at what you do. That was a half-assed last-minute joke, and you turned it into a really good answer with insights. That's pretty cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, I have some more jokes, some dad jokes, and I'm going to ask you later in this show for some gently worn dad jokes if you have any. So be ready for that. But
all right.
In the meantime, another topic that keeps me up at night is the fact that the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, and so you're from Buffalo.
I was
originally.
born in Buffalo. Yes,
But
yeah.
Who do you root for in the
Oh, I root for America's team.
America's
Kansas
team?
City Chiefs.
Kansas City
Yes,
Chiefs. That's
yeah,
right. You've
yeah.
heard of them? Has anybody heard of them? Let's go Chiefs.
I don't want to hear it from you, Dallas
go,
fans.
Chiefs.
Any Cincy fans out there?
I see a Bengals fan over there. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
3 rings. That's all I got to say. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to be like one of those Patriots fans who, like, over the years became so obnoxious. People like me are so grateful to be there because we suffered in the wilderness for 40 years of teams led by the likes of Steve Bono and Elvis Gerbach that always failed. And so just to have someone like Patrick Mahomes finally get us to the promised land, it's so rewarding. So I'm really grateful to the team for giving me, before I die, some semblance of hope.
Some semblance of hope. Glorious hope. But that reminds me of another question for you. Are we living in a simulation?
Wow.
Where it's 2020, Trump's president, the Olympics are going on, Dodgers won World Series, Dak is out for the season, the Steelers were in first place, AFC North, and the Bills beat the Chiefs in the regular season. Chiefs go on to win the Super Bowl. So we're just living in a simulation, and we can take that last part as a foregone conclusion, right? A three-peat.
One would hope, although I think Buffalo and a number of other teams are going to have something to say about that. But we've been very lucky. Look, 2 in a row, and I was at the Super Bowl this year, and it was seated in a Niners section, and I did not think we were going to pull it out. So we were very lucky to get there. And this year we've been getting by the skin of our teeth. So this is all much more luck, I think, at the end of the day than anything else.
Oh. Do you think we're living in a simulation?
I don't know. I sometimes wonder. It's what did Nietzsche's favorite innovation was the eternal recurrence. Like everything that's happened is going to happen again. I was skeptical when I was young, but now as you start to see these things happen over and over again, I've been there, seen that, and life will be okay. We'll get past it.
You're techie. As a recovering lawyer, you're also a techie.
Yeah.
You're a peanut butter chocolate aficionado. You're a former FCC chairman, but you're a techie. I have a question for you. Like, do you see a role in which software can help make all of these processes that these folks that are dealing in the regulatory government funding and utility operator space more efficient, more effective?
Oh, definitely. In so many different ways. I mean, as John knows, from the FCC alone, we used to do our auctions. We got auction authority in 1993, and we were running some of these auctions on paper, essentially. It's just unthinkable now, but that's the way these licenses were allocated. And fast forward to today, we have very enhanced automated software that can just get this done in a much more efficient, transparent way. And I'm sure the same is true for all of you. I mean, you have software tools at your disposal that, when I think of things like deconfliction alone, my God, can you imagine having to sit down there and think out by hand how to do this? It would just be impossible. Not to mention thankless, because the other advantage of software when it comes to systems like this that I think goes unremarked upon generally, but the folks in this room will appreciate it, is that the more automated or software-based a process is, the less likely it is to be attacked on political grounds. You're not going to have a politician or a provider coming to you and saying, hey, you just did such and such a favor by giving this an award. So the more likely you are able to focus on objective criteria and software that does the job, as opposed to you exercising discretion, the more likely it is to have public confidence. So.
Looking for people writing that down. That's
No, no. I mean, it's not some great insight from me, but it's one of the things I found when I was when you're administering the Universal Service Fund, obviously a $10 billion revolving fund at the FCC, a huge amount of time was spent by me and our staff on handling all of these inquiries from politicians or stakeholders or constituents, companies, saying, hey, such and such application fell through the cracks, or yes, we violated this rule, but give us a pass. And there are all kinds of public choice problems that attend to programs like this. And so the more automated it can be, the better.
Well said, full life cycle too, right? Like the automation of reporting and compliance in the post-award period, such that you're not going, hey, where's that paperwork? Because they got more important work to do than paperwork.
Yeah.
On the operator side, they got the job to get done, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and even on the accountability side, I mean, we Searchlight are looking for this, and if you guys know of any, let us know. But it's very difficult for us as an investor or sponsor to find software that tracks in real time how builds are going. How many miles did you build this week? What was the cost? Those types of things, so that as board members, investors, as public officials, we can have full insight into how the build is going, so that you don't hit this cadence of every milestone. Somebody comes to you and says, oh, the dog ate my homework, and you're taken by surprise. Ideally, you'd like to have software that could help you track this stuff.
Follow along with the journey of the deployment.
Because I think it's just much better for everybody involved.
As a partner.
Yeah.
You're a partner.
And so you have full alignment of provider, investor, public stakeholder, and the like. So we're on the same page.
Well, Ajit, we want to make time for the broadband leaders and luminaries in the room to ask really hard-hitting, important questions.
Yeah.
But I still have some smart-ass questions to ask you, so we're going to do that for just another couple of minutes. Okay, we're going to start. We're going to get into some dad jokes, and do you have any gently worn dad jokes that you can share with me?
Oh my God, I'm so sad that my daughter isn't here, because one of the great delights of being a dad, and prerogatives for those of you fathers in the room know, is embarrassing in front of their friends. And so now that she's 11, whenever she has her friends over, I just love telling her, like, Annabelle, get this, and her eyes roll, and like all of her friends are just like, oh God, here we go. So one of them, there are many of them I could use, but I want to be mindful of time. Oh my God, you got to be kidding me! That is hilarious.
Oh yeah, this is
that is unbelievable. So this is
for you.
Yes. Oh my God, get out!
It's for you.
Yeah, this is a mug. I love it. This is the same size as the
Cheers.
That's more of a John Oliver mug, I have to say. It's that is incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
For once, I'm speechless. That is something else. But God, I can't even think of a good dad joke now. I'm so thrown for a loop. But I guess the one I would say is, dad is walking with his daughter, and the daughter picks up a rock and says, "Well, do you know what this stone is?" And the dad says, "I'm not positive, but I wouldn't take it for granted." So, you may.
Wow.
You may groan, but you love it.
All right, so I'm gonna try a couple out on you. All right, so mimes kidnapped my friend, and they did unspeakable things to him.
Yes.
It's from Doc Talk.
Very nice.
Check out Doc Talk.
Very nice.
Do you know why I cannot stand elevator music?
Why?
Because it's horrible on so many levels. We got elevator music fans in the audience.
Yeah, right.
So Ajit, we super appreciate you. I want to make sure to touch on something before we turn it over to the audience for questions, because you're a pretty cool guy, but you also.
My kids would beg to differ, but I'll take it.
I don't want to embarrass you too much here, but I gotta go back to that. How do I do that? What is this thing? What is
Someone
technology?
at the FCC needs to look at
Yeah, let's get in there. Somebody from the internet who's got skills here. Hey, thank you. I'm gonna read it. I know it's you
Oh,
said this,
geez.
and I just
Oh, man.
to me you're like an embodiment of the American dream. So I want to read this to people, and then we'll turn it over to some questions. So be thinking of your questions, y'all. But I'm gonna read it for folks that are back in the back of the room. Speaking of being blessed, I often marvel at how fortunate I have been. I think of my late grandparents in India. One of them lost his father young and had to drop out of high school to work. Another ran a small spare auto parts store. I think of my parents who came to this country 45 years ago with literally no assets other than $10, a transistor radio, and a desire to achieve the American dream. I think of all of their sacrifices, all the risks they took, all those long hours they worked, all those moments when they must have warned about what the future would hold. None of them could ever have imagined that their great-grandson, their son, would have the honor of being asked to lead by the President of the United States. I hope my tenure as chairman will show me to worthy of sacrifices they made for me and the lessons they taught me. And I'm ever grateful that this wonderful country has given me and my family the opportunity to dream big.
Well,
So, thanks for all you do. You're a cool dude. You're a major asset to America and to the people that need connectivity. So we want to turn it over to these broadband leaders that have real questions. So,
God,
what questions y'all
emotional.
have?
I always get emotional thinking of that. That's that was my first day, full day on the job at the FCC, and as most incoming chairman, you give a speech to the staff, and that was a really special day.
We got some questions here.
Just to get things started, thanks so much for spending time with us today. You referenced in the remarks about spectrum. It's been a while since the FCC has had the ability to auction spectrum. How long do you think it'll take Congress
Oh my
to
gosh.
give that back?
I'm hopeful it will come back soon. I was listening to a podcast in which Senator Cruz, the incoming chair of the Senate Commerce Committee, said that his very top priority on that committee, and its jurisdiction is quite broad, covering everything from oceans to transportation, but his top priority is going to be spectrum. And he has a bill, the Spectrum Pipeline Act, that would allocate or direct the allocation of some 2,500 megahertz of licensed spectrum into the marketplace. That would be a tremendous game changer. And it's really amazing when you think about it that this is probably one of the greatest innovations in government history. I mean, this idea pioneered by Ronald Coase in 1959, allocating the scarce property right through the means of the market mechanism, as opposed to FCC commissioners saying, I like you, but not you. Amazing, generated hundreds of billions of revenue. And 1 year after Paul Milgram won the Nobel Prize in economics, because he helped institute this auction mechanism, the FCC lost authority to do it. And so this is something that I hope comes back, and it's a pay for the government, so it's not a partisan issue as well. So stay tuned. I think good things are coming in the next Congress, the next White House.
Thank you.
Good question. Who else?
Sure.
Hey.
Thank you again for spending some time with us. I just was wondering if you would be able to touch on the intersection of BEAD and carrier of last resort.
Yeah.
We're spending billions of dollars to build out to the last mile in many areas where there's not a business case, yet there's many providers that have a carrier of last resort responsibility for that same exact area. Do you think there should be any relief, or what action should be taken?
Yeah, and here, look, I'm preaching my book, but I'm also preaching what I believe. I do believe that those regulations should be relaxed in appropriate cases. And I think that ultimately what you're doing is just distorting the investment incentives for a lot of these companies. Like we have companies, for example, that are building these very rural areas and would be willing to underwrite a fiber bill to those areas. But the COLR obligations are just so onerous that we can't get rid of some of the legacy network that we have. And it's weird because it's, the consumers that we serve want fiber. We want to supply it to them, but you have this archaic regulatory requirement that stands in the way. So, look, I would encourage folks to really think future-proof infrastructure instead of yesterday's regulatory requirements. It sounds great in theory to have COLR obligations, but at the end of the day, if you're essentially preventing some of your constituents from getting the technology of the future, are you really serving the public interest in those cases? So, I was very much deregulatory in that area when I was in office, and I would hope that others would be as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just worried about some some of the BEAD networks being cannibalized by carrier of last resort when the other networks have to build out to those areas.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Hi, thank you.
Hey.
Appreciate it. Nearly everyone agrees that the Universal Service Fund needs to be reformed. Many opinions on how we fund that reform. I'd love to hear you talk about some thoughts there.
So now that I'm out of office, I can say, and I think I might have said it in my last speech or hinted at it, but I do think that the time has come for Congress to shift this program to a general appropriation, as opposed to the FCC essentially overseeing what is currently, anyway, under the Fifth Circuit's decision, an unconstitutional exaction from consumers. Moreover, a regressive exaction to the extent that it's allocated to phone customers and doesn't include broadband services or big tech or whatever you pick your constituency. And I also think, as I mentioned earlier, the public choice problems that attend the Universal Service Fund, because the FCC administers it and oversees it, we spend an enormous amount of time and money just on the contribution and the distribution side. So what I would love to see is Congress say, FCC, this is the USF budget for fiscal year 2025. Now go structure programs to address these particular priorities, high cost or rural healthcare, whatever it is. I think we'd be much better off in that circumstance, and you wouldn't have the situation now where we're essentially getting more and more money from a declining base of contributors, and it's just a really unwieldy system right now. So we'll see what happens in the Supreme Court, of course. I think, well, it's hard to say, but if they upheld the Fifth Circuit's decision, either the FCC would have to reform the program, or if the program went away, I think you'd see a big bipartisan swell of support for this kind of idea that I've suggested.
Nice.
Hey, Ajit,
Hey,
thanks
Brian.
for the question. What do you think the future of the Affordable Connectivity Program is?
Well, there is no future now. As you know, the program has expired. But and I would like to say that I'm grateful to Congress for establishing it, because we set it up during COVID as what we call the EBB, Emergency Broadband Benefit. And I think the benefits of it were shown such that they allocated a certain amount of money for ACP. So I do think it has been successful to some extent in of course, helping those consumers who, at the lower end of the income scale, were just not going to be able to afford broadband otherwise. But I'm not sure what the bipartisan appetite is in the new administration and new Congress for establishing it. Obviously, Vice President-elect Vance was a supporter of it, reauthorizing of it, but there are also others who were opposed to it. So I can't really forecast with any precision whether it's likely to come back. There are obviously some headwinds just generally. The country's fiscal situation is in a pretty dire state. And if anything, people are looking to pare back from public spend as opposed to adding. So I'm not sure. But one of the things I'm hopeful for, going back to the spectrum auction question, I'm hopeful. One of the ideas I proposed to Congress, which was promptly dismissed, was allowing the FCC to redirect some of the auction proceeds to important national priorities. So one of the things the FCC could do, for example, if Congress gave the FCC this flexibility, is to allocate, say, 10% of auction proceeds to help with the ACP and sort of create a revolving fund in that way. And to give you a sense of the quantum we're talking about, the C-band auction, which was the last auction I administered, generated $93 billion revenue for the U.S. Treasury. If we'd allocated 10% of that for the ACP, that's $9 billion just in one auction. So you can imagine that could have really helped address some of the concerns that people had about ACP going away. So we'll see where things go. But I wouldn't pencil in a reestablishment of the ACP just yet, sorry to say.
So one of the challenges with BEAD has been that we're all doing generally the same thing in 56 somewhat unique different manners, except for Louisiana, who just doesn't listen, apparently.
Yeah. Hey,
Which I appreciate.
Laissez le bon temps rouler, right?
Putting on your investor hat, your Searchlight hat, or your carrier hat, what can we as states do to align, especially as we think about the long-term requirements, compliance and reporting, to align to promote greater efficiency for those subgrantees?
Oh, what a great question. I mean, I think the biggest thing is things like this, fora where you can share best practices, talk amongst yourselves about what is working and what's not. I think the FCC rightfully gets a lot of criticism for RDOF. One good thing is, of course, that you had a uniform set of rules and everyone could see, and the administration was uniform across the country. One of the disadvantages is that any mistake you made was, of course, replicated nationally. On the state level, of course, you have essentially 50 different programs, and so as an investor, it's been very, very challenging. Some states, to be candid, have made the rules quite difficult to navigate, and in some cases, we just don't see a path to getting there, and so we're not going to invest in those states, period. But in the states that are more open to encouraging private investment for the companies that they're looking to back, I think that sharing best practices is really, really helpful. The letter of credit requirements, I know, sort of an easy pinata, but I can tell you that it is a massive albatross for the companies, smaller companies that we're looking to back. There just isn't a financial product for some of these companies to get in the market that would help them. And so to the extent that you can talk to some of your compadres who have relaxed those requirements, as Louisiana has done, that's really helpful. Or just different, I mean, it's probably too late now, but just project areas, deconfliction protocols, like all of the things, to the extent you can standardize it, it makes it so much easier. And I know it's difficult because your allocations are different. And so you've got to think about addressing the Internet for All proposition in a very different way, but in this state. So good luck. I mean, I really hope that you guys can coordinate as much as you can, because I know it's not easy. Instead of standing up a program from scratch in some cases.
Great question.
Hey.
So being familiar with the FCC BDC and the reporting and all of that,
Yeah.
and seeing that, for the most part, all the ISPs were responsible, right? But there were quite a few that might have been a little bit optimistic in their reporting. So
That's a fair thing to say. No kidding.
So I see that this self-reporting isn't working. I'd like your thoughts on, where we should go as an industry, not only with the funding, but even beyond funding of, requiring performance testing on broadband. I know we came up with this broadband nutritional label or something like that to try and provide some more truth in broadband. I'm just wondering if you had some thoughts on that.
Oh, God, where to get started? I mean, it was so frustrating when I was in office to see these overstatements of coverage that you knew were overstatements. But, like the FCC is an agency with limited resources. We couldn't go out there and we're not going to do drive testing. We couldn't in every single state ourselves. But you knew it was overstated. Mobility Fund was a good example of that, where we had carriers that were purporting to provide essentially 5G quality coverage when we knew there wasn't even 4G coverage. And it was really, I mean, that's part of the reason why we couldn't pursue the 5G fund when I was in office, is that we just couldn't get to ground truth on where wireless coverage was and where it wasn't. And so I think part of what I'd like the FCC to do, and it's, I think, started down this road to its credit, is just enhancing the penalties for reporting inaccurate coverage. I mean, that's so important. It's, to borrow from that Seinfeld episode where he's trying to get the car rental. I mean, it's one thing to take the reservation. It's another thing to hold the reservation. It's one thing to say you have coverage. What really matters is like having the coverage. And to the extent that you have penalties on the back end, they're going to give these regulations some teeth. That's super important. And here too, I'd encourage you to enlist private resources to help you. In one of the states where we engage, for example, we backed a company. We helped the state in trying to figure out how many BSLs they actually had. And so we commissioned our own drive testing. We used Searchlight. And so we helped them increase the numbers of BSLs and increase their overall allocation we had to estimate by some 27%, because we were finding all of these locations were purportedly served by unlicensed fixed wireless, or in some cases even 5G that we knew, or cable that had not been upgraded. The HFC plant might theoretically support 100 over 20, but we knew based on what we were seeing that it was under 25. So there are a lot of people like us out there. We're not the only ones. So you think of the private industry, both operators and investors, as partners with you, because at the end of the day, our interests are aligned and we can help you get to ground truth much more quickly, and in some cases at no cost to you.
So email Ajit with your questions.
Well, in all seriousness, I mean, I honestly, this has nothing to do with Searchlight, but because I have the same laboring oar that you do in this enterprise, you can always find me on LinkedIn, and I'm not charging you, I'm not preaching my book, or if I am, I'll tell you, but I'm more than happy to help, because I know how difficult it is to navigate these tricky waters, and I want us to get the job right. We're in it all together at the end of the day.
That's a pretty sweet offer.
Yeah, no
have
charge.
This guy
no charge
on the team, so.
Of course, it's going to be worth what you paid for it, but
yeah. Quality, quantity.
Yeah, right.
Well, I would love to have your predictions on what will come of USF reform. And then relatedly, it's my understanding that Commissioner Carr, soon to be chairman, wants big tech to contribute, whereas maybe Senator Cruz, who will have oversight authority, does not agree. So how will that play out?
Wow, going right to the heart of it. So I'll take the second one first. I mean, my understanding based on the legal landscape is that it would take an act of Congress to make an assessment on technology companies. And so we'll see. I mean, there's a big appetite for that. And in Europe, as you may know, the Digital Services Act and some of the other legislative vehicles the European Union has adopted essentially require contributions from big tech to support the infrastructure that they're riding over. And so I think there's growing appetite for that in the United States. I do think there should be a broader assessment of the contribution. I mean, assessing USF on phone customers is just ridiculous. It's, this is going back to the Yoda conversation. I mean, I think we need to forget some of the old paradigms of doing things. And it used to drive me crazy. And when I was in office, that USF is structured the way it is, or when it comes to the media marketplace, that for the purposes of the media ownership rules the FCC administers, we don't consider streaming or other types of internet-based platforms to be media products. Whereas my kids, when they think of we want to watch TV, it's all streaming. It's just weird stuff like that. But anyway, so I would like to see some legislative conversation about this because it would require legislative change. In terms of USF, it really does depend on what the Supreme Court does and how, if at all, the FCC responds. So it's been a while since I essentially created a Carter Cole violation. Carter Cole being that old Supreme Court's case that said that a governmental institution can't delegate to a non-governmental institution rulemaking authority or administration. So could an FCC order just update its rules to solve the problem? I don't know. We're going to find out. But yeah, I can't wait to attend the Supreme Court argument. It's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out.
Nice question.
So thank you. I have a question, a little speculative in a bit. What do you see as the future of broadband expansion beyond this phase of government funded infrastructure? So beyond, BEAD, ARPA, CPF, RDOF, what does the future of broadband expansion look like, in your opinion?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's incredibly bright. And I think that, of course, we've been talking a lot about residential broadband, but I think there's such significant tailwinds for broadband that I don't think yet are fully appreciated. We're at the dawn of a revolution in AI, for example. And one of the things we look at is the tremendous growth in data centers that are able to handle some of the internet traffic that's going to be generated by all these users. And those data centers come with tremendous requirements of their own, one of which, of course, is power and things like that. But another one is broadband. And so you're going to need ever fatter and deeper pipes throughout the country to help accommodate that data center use. And moreover, some of the other verticals that I mentioned earlier, I think are going to drive tremendous broadband penetration, precision agriculture,
absolutely,
telehealth. I mean, we're just scratching the surface. And so to me, it's not unthinkable. Oh, I should mention AR, VR as well, that you're going to see a lot more, and other types of mobile applications that are going to be very high bandwidth, require low latency.
See, you're a techie.
I'm not a techie, but I just think it's incredible.
You're a closet techie.
Well, for someone like me, it's just so unthinkable that, when I was a kid, going back to that quote you mentioned, it's just amazing to me that when I was a kid to talk to my grandparents in India, my grandparents had to reserve a 10-minute block of time from the local post office.
Oh my
And then
God.
my parents would have to get on the phone, and like wired phone into the wall. And we'd have 10 minutes to just all four of us convey our thoughts. And now it's, wherever I am on a 5G or Wi-Fi connection, I can connect with I can have a Zoom call with all of my cousins from the UK to Germany to Austria, Australia to India. So if flash forward a generation from now, I mean, there are things that all of those in this room would just laugh at, but they're going to be commonplace. And so the one thing that's a constant, though, is the increase in bandwidth demand. So I'm really confident that
an insatiable demand for bandwidth. And to your point earlier about the digital services of tomorrow, it's not just the bandwidth, right? You were touching on the data centers, and we think a lot about information infrastructure as a three-legged stool where transmission is one leg, but compute and store are the other leg.
Oh, it's tremendous.
And having remote distributed compute and store resources, edge infrastructure that's not just pipes, crisscrossing, but capable of processing is going to be essential to next generation telehealth, so.
Definitely. And I mentioned power, by the way. I mean, I don't know if any of you have jurisdiction over power too. That is a major bottleneck in the United States. You do not generate enough power to accommodate all of this bandwidth use. And so I know the temptation in some quarters might be, well, that's the energy sector's problem. It's our problem. It really is. And so we need to think creatively, and regardless of party affiliation, I hope that we have a place where we can innovate more in terms of energy, whether it's small modular reactors on the nuclear side or just generating more power from traditional sources. We really need to get more power out there. And I think it's going to help entrepreneurship and innovation too.
Yeah, you got to talk to the guys at Amperage that are doing they call it poly utility, like Brad Powell and Jack Lawrence and those guys. Because you're absolutely right. The more that you think of those things as sort of overlapping utilities, the better outcomes you're going to drive, right?
Yeah.
And it is legally and morally at this point a utility, broadband.
Yeah.
Right. So perfect. We have 2 more minutes, folks. I want to make sure we get at least one more question, and then we got a word from our sponsor and a note about some upcoming.
Yeah, it's either that or dad jokes. So take your pick.
You pick. Who here? Raise your hand. Dad jokes. You got a question?
All right. So thanks, Ajit. Appreciate taking some time. One of my concerns in kind of looking at the Fifth Circuit ruling is thinking about E-rate. And so, as can you identify a couple of the risks to the E-rate program, number one, and then what should states and then educational institutions that go after it themselves be thinking about for the future to help mitigate those risks?
Wow, good question. So, certainly E-rate faces the same general problems that the USF program does in both the sense of the declining contribution base and the legal foundation for the entire program. So we'll see how those two things play out in the years to come. More generally, though, I think the problem that E-rate has, and this is something that I thought of as a commissioner and proposed, and that's the one regret I have from my time as chairman, is that we didn't reform the program, is just to make it more user-friendly. I know that there are some school districts and individual schools and libraries that do fantastic work with E-rate. But I remember very vividly going to my own hometown. I grew up in Parsons, Kansas, and relatively lower income community, 3 hours south of Kansas City. Very small school district, and they did not have the money to hire an E-rate consultant or otherwise navigate the thicket of forms. A mistake on any one of which would have put them into this USAC appeal process. And so it really broke my heart when the school district administrator told me, we don't even bother applying for E-rate because it's so complicated. I would love to see a future FCC just streamline this entire process. Either make it a student-based process so you get a fixed amount of funding based on the number of students you have, some objective criteria that allows you to make an application process just one page, either for a school or a library or for a school district, so that anybody, anywhere, should have the ability to apply for and get funding. And secondarily, I would say that E-rate should be restructured to give school districts more flexibility. Some schools that are more advanced may need sort of internal Wi-Fi connections. Other schools that are more in the starting blocks may need fiber or whatever it is. But give them the flexibility to decide what it is that they want and institute accountability measures in the back end to make sure that they use those monies for the purpose intended. But where we are right now, it's just, there's some school districts, and you see some of these are criminal cases where the school district gets a ridiculous amount of funding and you see computers or other equipment just sitting in closets because they never use it. Because it's just a waste of money. And then you see school districts like mine, which just don't get anything. And so to me, at least, educational equity in the tech space means that your ability to leverage these technologies should not depend on who you are, where you happen to live, or the facility of your school district. It should just be a flat opportunity for everybody to benefit from the E-rate program.
Wow.
Oh, Dr. H?
Well, yeah, definitely.
Oh, sorry.
Dr. Holmes, please. Question. We'll go a couple minutes long.
We call that land up here in Louisiana, right, Tom? Yeah.
Ajit, so one question I have, and so in Virginia, just to bring up RDOF, it is the elephant in the room for a lot of directors with potential companies defaulting, right?
Right.
And so we've been fortunate in Virginia where we've been able to work through a lot of 214s where the RDOF winner has now said, okay, we're really not going to build it out. We don't want to default. And so we've been doing a lot of transfer of RDOF locations from RDOF winners to other providers that they might have beat in RDOF, right? And so other states aren't even having those conversations yet. And so I'd just be curious, with you all working with a lot of providers in many other states, how are you all sharing that opportunity? Because I don't think a lot of folks know that states have the ability to do that if providers are willing to take on the RDOF. And so we've been really successful where we know that we've been able to get out in front of defaults and be able to either add them to BEAD or be able to move them to an existing body project and get them built out now.
This great question, and this is one of the things I wish it could have been figured out before BEAD began in earnest. Of course, I was hoping that the FCC would weed out some of these RDOF zombies, you might call them, that are just, they have the award, but they're not going to build, but they're also not going to default because there's no sort of mechanism to force them to default. And I would much prefer, I would love for them to be defaulted so that you can get those back into the BSL pool and you can address them in BEAD. Because I think the worst thing in the world would be if after all of this is done, we spent all of this money and you still have tens of thousands of locations that don't have broadband. Because they're not going to be a BEAD 2.0, right? This is it. So we should get it right now. So if a state doesn't have, or the FCC won't force them into default, I would definitely encourage all the RDOF recipients and others to be aware that there is this possibility of essentially transferring the RDOF liability or opportunity to another provider that's going to do the job. I bet you a lot of them just they don't want to turn their RDOF board in because they're worried about what that might mean. But if you sort of create a safe space for them to relinquish it, there are plenty of other. I mean, look, we back companies that do exactly this, and we want to build into those that. So we view them as valuable locations. So that would be terrific. I don't know if NTI is going to put out guidance along those lines, or the FCC might put out a notice saying, "Hey, we encourage this type of intercompany transaction in cooperation with your state." But that could be really powerful, especially before the competitive process is done, of course.
Folks, today's fireside chat with Ajit Pai is brought to you by teleguam.com. If you absolutely have to telecom, make sure it's teleguam.com. But on that, I want to
I'm genuinely afraid to look at the domain on my phone. I'm not sure what's going to pop up. But
Ajit, thank you so much for all you do to get folks connected and making time. And go check out teleguam.com. I think you'll like it. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. This is great. Thanks for the mug.
All right, everyone. We are swiftly transitioning into our afternoon session. So you've got 12 minutes. 12 minutes.
He's so good.
To do whatever you need to do. We have the servers come in and clear out plates over on the side. We're going to meet back here at 1:15 for our beginning of our afternoon programming. We're starting off with a showcase and demonstration of automated reporting and compliance with Connect Louisiana. So come back here in about 1:15 and we'll be ready to go. Thank you.
Just like your songs, the beat ain't bad, but the words are all wrong. It's time to pack my bags, it's time to just move on. She sang, Johnny, I'm gone, gone, gone. And she was gone. Me and Lee met summer 95 in a burgundy dress, looking fine at that French wine. Cajun queen with another side, she was a schoolboy's dream. I was out of my mind. She was looking fine. She said, you wanna drive me home? But what I didn't know, I was dancing with the queen of New Orleans. Dancing in the streets of New Orleans. Dancing cheek to cheek in New Orleans. It was almost like a dream. That night I made a move and I fell hard when I put my hands in a cookie jar. She was more than a girl, she was a cabaret star. I was a deer in the lights of a speeding car. Nothing's what it seemed. She was a Venus de Milo in his sister's jeans. Ooh, I was dancing with the queen of New Orleans. Ooh, dancing in the streets of New Orleans. Ooh, dancing cheek to cheek in New Orleans. Ooh, it was almost like a dream. Dancing with the Queen of New Orleans. Ooh, dancing in the streets of New Orleans. Ooh, I was dancing cheek to cheek in New Orleans. Ooh, dancing with the Queen down Bourbon Street. Ooh, dancing with the Queen of New Orleans. Ooh, dancing in the streets of New Orleans. Ooh, nothing's what it seems in New Orleans. Ooh, dancing with the Queen of New Orleans. Ooh, dancing with the Queen of New Orleans. Ooh, dancing with the Queen of New Orleans. Ooh, dancing with the Queen.
My grandma and your grandma were sitting by the fire. My grandma told your grandma, I'm gonna set your flag on fire. You're talking about hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. Aiko, Aiko, ande. Giacomo Fino, anane. Giacomo Finane. Look at my king all dressed in red. Aiko, Aiko, ande. I bet you $5 he'll kill you dead. Giacomo Finane. Talking about hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. Aiko, Aiko, ande. Giacomo Fino, anane. Giacomo Finane. My flag boy and your flag boy sitting by the fire. My flag boy to your flag boy, I'm gonna set your flag on fire. You're talking about hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. Aiko, Aiko, ande. Giacomo Fino, anane. Giacomo Finane. See that guy all dressed in green? Aiko, Aiko, ande. He's not a man, he's a loving machine. Giacomo Finane. Talking about hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. Aiko, Aiko, ande. Giacomo Fino, anane. Giacomo Finane. Talking about hey now, hey now, hey now. Aiko, Aiko, ande. Giacomo Fino, anane. Giacomo Finane. Giacomo Finane. Giacomo Finane. Aiko. Giacomo Finane.
The most famous of all the voodoo queens that ever existed is Marie Laveau down in Louisiana. A lot of weird, ungodly tales about Marie. She's supposed to have a lot of magic potions and spells and curses. Down in Louisiana where the black trees grow lives a voodoo lady named Marie Laveau. She got a black cat tooth and a mojo bone. Anyone who wouldn't leave her alone, she go, another man done gone. She lives in a swamp in a hollow log with a one-eyed snake and a three-legged dog. She got a bent, bony body and stringy hair. And if she ever seen y'all messing around there, she go, I know the man done gone. And then one night when the moon was black, into the swamp come handsome Jack. A no good man like you all know. When he was looking around for Marie Laveau, he said,